The moment Lindsay Lohan stepped onto the set of The View, the atmosphere already felt unusually tense, as if something unscripted was hovering in the air. She smiled for the cameras, greeted the hosts politely, and took her seat, but viewers could sense a subtle stiffness in her posture. This was supposed to be a casual conversation about her career resurgence, yet from the opening exchange, the energy felt sharper, more unpredictable, as if both sides were bracing for a conversation that could easily spiral out of control. Joy Behar began the discussion with what sounded like a harmless question, but the tone carried an edge that didn't go unnoticed. She referenced Lindsay's past controversies, framing them as lessons learned, but the wording felt less reflective and more probing. Lindsay nodded, attempting to respond calmly, choosing her words carefully, yet her expression revealed discomfort. The studio audience laughed lightly, but the laughter felt misplaced, adding to the growing sense that the conversation was drifting into dangerous territory. As Lindsay spoke about personal growth and accountability, Joy interjected with a comment that shifted the mood instantly. It wasn't openly hostile, but it suggested skepticism, implying that Hollywood comebacks were often more about image repair than genuine change. Lindsay paused for a moment, visibly collecting herself, then replied with measured confidence. She emphasized the work she had done privately, away from cameras, but the tension between guest and host was now unmistakable. The exchange grew more intense when Joy pressed further, questioning whether public sympathy had played a role in Lindsay's renewed success. Lindsay's voice remained steady, but her eyes revealed frustration. She explained that she had earned her place back through discipline and commitment, not pity. The audience shifted in their seats, sensing the friction. Co-hosts attempted to soften the moment with brief interjections, but the focus had already narrowed to the growing clash. Lindsay's responses became more personal as she described the emotional toll of constant public judgment. She spoke about being defined by past mistakes and the struggle of moving forward when those mistakes are endlessly replayed. Joy listened, arms crossed, then responded with a remark that sounded dismissive to some viewers. That single sentence seemed to tip the balance, changing the exchange from tense discussion to something far more confrontational. The studio fell unusually quiet as Lindsay pushed back, asserting that her experiences were not entertainment for debate panels. She reminded everyone that real lives exist behind headlines and sound bites. Her words were firm but not aggressive, yet the emotional weight behind them was heavy. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every micro-expression, while social media began reacting in real time, sensing that this interview was no longer following the expected script. Joy defended her line of questioning, arguing that public figures invite scrutiny by choosing the spotlight. Her tone sharpened, and the back and forth became more rapid. Lindsay leaned forward, clearly engaged but increasingly upset. She clarified that accountability and exploitation were not the same thing, and that revisiting painful chapters for ratings crossed the line. The audience murmured, divided on who they felt was in the right. At this point, Lindsay's composure began to crack. Her voice wavered slightly as she spoke about mental health and the pressure of growing up under relentless media attention. She explained that recovery is not a performance but a process. Joy responded with a quip that, intentionally or not, minimized the emotional weight of Lindsay's statement. That moment visibly changed Lindsay's demeanor, signaling that she was nearing her breaking point. One of the co-hosts attempted to redirect the conversation toward Lindsay's current projects, but the effort felt forced. The unresolved tension lingered in the air. Lindsay answered briefly, clearly distracted, her earlier enthusiasm gone. Joy, however, circled back to the controversy, suggesting that public accountability conversations were necessary. The disconnect between them widened, turning the interview into a standoff rather than a dialogue. Lindsay finally drew a clear boundary, stating that she was there to discuss her work, not to be interrogated about her past in a way that felt judgmental. Her tone was calm but firm, leaving little room for misinterpretation. The audience applauded lightly, sensing the importance of the moment. Joy appeared taken aback, responding defensively, and the temperature in the studio rose another notch. As the conversation escalated, Lindsay's patience visibly thinned. She reiterated that healing doesn't require public approval and that she had already taken responsibility for her mistakes. Joy countered by saying public figures don't get to control narratives once they're public. That statement struck a nerve. Lindsay shook her head slowly, as if realizing the conversation was no longer productive or respectful. The emotional weight of the exchange became overwhelming. Lindsay took a deep breath, attempting one last time to explain her perspective. She spoke about forgiveness, both from others and herself, and the importance of allowing people to evolve. Her voice carried sincerity, but the response she received felt dismissive once again. The gaps between understanding and provocation seemed impossible to bridge at this point. Cameras captured Lindsay glancing offstage briefly, as if seeking reassurance or deciding her next move. The studio lights felt harsher, the silence heavier. Joy's final comment in the exchange, delivered with a half-smile, appeared to trivialize the emotional depth Lindsay had just shared. That was the moment when Lindsay's body language shifted decisively from engagement to withdrawal. Without raising her voice, Lindsay stated that she didn't feel respected in the conversation. The words landed with a thud. The audience gasped softly, sensing something unprecedented was about to happen. Joy attempted to respond, but Lindsay gently raised her hand, signaling she was finished. Her face showed disappointment rather than anger, which made the moment even more powerful. Lindsay stood up slowly, adjusting her microphone as producers scrambled behind the scenes. She thanked the other hosts politely, acknowledging them individually, but avoided eye contact with Joy. The gesture was calm and deliberate, not impulsive. As she stepped away from the table, the studio fell into stunned silence, broken only by scattered applause and audible whispers from the audience. The camera followed Lindsay briefly as she walked off the set, her expression controlled but clearly emotional. Viewers at home immediately sensed the gravity of what had just unfolded. This wasn't a dramatic exit fueled by rage, it was a quiet assertion of self-respect. The host sat frozen for a moment, visibly unsure how to proceed as the reality of the situation sank in. Joy attempted to fill the silence with a remark about passionate discussions, but it felt hollow. The other co-hosts exchanged uneasy glances, trying to recalibrate the show's tone. The energy in the room had shifted irreversibly. What was meant to be daytime television suddenly felt raw and uncomfortable, leaving both the audience and the hosts grappling with the consequences of the confrontation. As the show cut to commercial, social media exploded with reactions. Clips of the exchange circulated rapidly, with viewers dissecting every word, glance, and pause. Some defended Joy's role as a provocateur, while others praised Lindsay for standing up for herself. The incident quickly became a trending topic, reigniting broader conversations about media accountability and celebrity boundaries. Behind the scenes, sources would later suggest that emotions were running high on both sides. Lindsay, according to insiders, felt blindsided by the direction of the interview. Joy, on the other hand, reportedly believed she was doing her job by asking tough questions. Regardless of intent, the clash revealed a deeper disconnect between media formats built on confrontation and guests seeking respectful dialogue. Fans of Lindsay rallied online, sharing messages of support and admiration for her composure. Many pointed out how difficult it must be to revisit personal struggles in a public forum, especially when those struggles are treated as talking points rather than lived experiences. The walk-off was reframed by supporters as an act of empowerment rather than avoidance. Critics, however, argued that public figures must be prepared for uncomfortable questions. They suggested that walking off set sends the wrong message about accountability. This divide in public opinion only fueled the story further, ensuring that the moment would be analyzed and debated for days. The conversation expanded beyond Lindsay and Joy, touching on the ethics of daytime television itself. Media analysts weighed in, noting how interviews often blur the line between curiosity and provocation. They pointed out that moments like this expose the pressure cooker environment of live television, where empathy can easily be overshadowed by the pursuit of viral moments. Lindsay's exit became a case study in what happens when that balance tips too far. In the hours following the broadcast, clips were replayed across news segments and online platforms. Each replay added new interpretations, new angles, and new narratives. Some saw resilience in Lindsay's calm departure, while others saw unresolved tension that could have been handled differently. The ambiguity only added to the story's staying power. Joy addressed the incident briefly in a later segment, framing it as a passionate exchange that went further than expected. Her words were measured, but they didn't fully resolve the public's questions. Lindsay, meanwhile, chose silence, letting her actions speak louder than any statement. That silence became part of the narrative, interpreted in multiple ways. The incident reignited discussions about how women, especially former child stars, are treated in the media. Many argued that Lindsay's past continues to define her in ways that limit her ability to move forward publicly. The confrontation became symbolic of a larger cultural issue, resonating far beyond a single television episode. For Lindsay, the walk-off marked another defining moment in a career filled with public highs and lows. Unlike past controversies, this moment felt different. It wasn't chaotic or scandal-driven, it was controlled, intentional, and rooted in self-preservation. That distinction mattered to fans who have followed her journey closely. Industry insiders speculated about whether the incident would change how future interviews are conducted. Some suggested producers might rethink their approach, while others believed controversy remains too valuable to abandon. Regardless, the confrontation served as a reminder that live television carries real emotional consequences for everyone involved. As days passed, the intensity of the reaction slowly settled, but the questions lingered. Where should the line be drawn between tough journalism and personal respect? How much of a public figure's past should remain fair game? Lindsay's quiet exit forced viewers to confront these uncomfortable questions without providing easy answers. In retrospect, the moment wasn't just about a disagreement between Lindsay Lohan and Joy Behar. It was about power, narrative control, and the human cost of public scrutiny. The simplicity of Lindsay standing up and walking away became a powerful image, replayed and remembered long after the broadcast ended. Ultimately, the walk-off left an indelible mark on daytime television history. It reminded audiences that behind every celebrity is a person with limits, and behind every question is a responsibility. Whether seen as justified or controversial, Lindsay's departure transformed a routine interview into a cultural flashpoint that continues to spark conversation and reflection. As the debate continued online, longtime viewers of The View began revisiting past moments where interviews had crossed similar lines. Many pointed out that confrontation has become a defining feature of modern talk shows, often blurring the distinction between honest discussion and emotional provocation. In Lindsay's case, supporters argued that the format itself seemed stacked against her, creating an environment where vulnerability was met with skepticism rather than understanding, amplifying the emotional stakes of every response she gave on air. Entertainment journalists soon analyzed Lindsay's body language frame by frame, noting how her posture gradually shifted from open and relaxed to guarded and defensive. These subtle changes told a story of someone trying to remain professional while feeling increasingly cornered. By the time she stood up, many felt the decision had been made long before her feet touched the floor, the result of accumulating discomfort rather than a sudden emotional outburst. Discussions also emerged about Joy Behar's long-standing role as a provocateur on the show. Some viewers defended her approach, claiming she represents a voice that challenges celebrity narratives. Others argued that her style often relies on minimizing personal experiences to provoke reaction. This clash of expectations highlighted a broader issue in media culture, where conflict is often prioritized over compassion, especially when a viral moment is at stake. Lindsay's silence after the incident only intensified public curiosity. Unlike many celebrities who rushed to social media to clarify or defend their actions, she chose restraint. That decision resonated with fans who saw it as a sign of maturity and growth. Rather than fueling the controversy, her quiet withdrawal suggested confidence in her choice, allowing the public to interpret the moment without added commentary or damage control. Industry psychologists weighed in, explaining how revisiting past trauma in a confrontational setting can trigger emotional responses that are difficult to manage. They emphasize that recovery is rarely linear and that public interrogation can undo years of private healing. Lindsay's reaction, they argued, was not weakness but a protective response, reinforcing the importance of boundaries even for those accustomed to public scrutiny. Meanwhile, clips of the confrontation continued circulating across platforms, often edited with dramatic music or captions that framed the exchange as more explosive than it actually was. These edits fueled polarized opinions, showing how digital storytelling can reshape reality. The nuance of Lindsay's calm tone and controlled exit was sometimes lost, replaced by exaggerated narratives designed to maximize engagement rather than truth. Some fellow celebrities subtly showed support by liking posts or sharing messages about respecting boundaries, though few addressed the incident directly. Their quiet gestures spoke volumes, suggesting an unspoken understanding within the industry. Many performers have faced similar situations, where interviews intended to promote work turned into interrogations about personal history, leaving guests emotionally exposed. Television producers were reportedly paying close attention to the backlash, aware that audience expectations are evolving. Viewers increasingly demand authenticity without cruelty, depth without exploitation. Lindsay's walk-off became a warning sign that audiences may no longer tolerate moments that feel emotionally one-sided, even if they generate short-term buzz and ratings. Academic commentators also entered the conversation, framing the incident within the context of media ethics. They questioned whether daytime television, often marketed as light and conversational, carries a responsibility to avoid re-traumatizing guests. Lindsay's experience became a reference point in these discussions, illustrating the emotional cost when entertainment value overrides empathy. For many fans, the moment felt personal. Those who grew up watching Lindsay's films saw her not as a headline but as a familiar figure whose struggles played out publicly from a young age. Her decision to walk away mirrored experiences many viewers face in their own lives, choosing self-respect over staying in conversations that feel dismissive or harmful. The show itself continued as usual in subsequent episodes, but the shadow of the incident lingered. Viewers scrutinized later interviews more closely, sensitive to tone and intent. Any sharp question now risked being compared to the Lindsay moment, showing how a single exchange can recalibrate audience perception and expectations for an entire program. Commentators noted that the confrontation revealed generational differences in how accountability is discussed. Older media traditions often favored tough questioning as a sign of credibility, while newer audiences prioritize emotional intelligence. Lindsay's response aligned more with the latter, highlighting a cultural shift that may redefine how public conversations are conducted in the future. As weeks passed, the story gradually faded from headlines, but its impact remained. Lindsay returned to her work, focusing on projects that emphasized creativity rather than controversy. Her ability to move forward without engaging in prolonged public debate reinforced the impression of someone who has learned to protect her peace in an industry that often demands constant explanation. Joy Behar, too, continued her role on the show, though viewers noticed a slightly more measured tone in subsequent interviews. Whether intentional or coincidental, the change suggested that the incident had prompted reflection behind the scenes. Even seasoned hosts are not immune to moments that challenge their approach and spark internal reassessment. In the end, the confrontation became more than a fleeting television moment. It served as a mirror reflecting broader tensions between media, celebrity, and audience expectations. Lindsay Lohan walking off The View wasn't just an exit, it was a statement about dignity, growth, and the right to disengage, leaving behind a lasting conversation that continues to shape how such moments are understood. As the incident continued to echo across entertainment circles, publicists and media trainers began referencing it as a cautionary tale. They pointed out how quickly a promotional appearance can derail when expectations between hosts and guests are misaligned. Lindsay's walk-off was increasingly described as a strategic instinct rather than an emotional lapse, a moment where self-awareness overrode the pressure to remain seated simply for the sake of optics. Fans revisiting the full, unedited footage noticed how often Lindsay attempted to redirect the conversation toward meaningful reflection rather than surface-level controversy. Each attempt was met with resistance, reinforcing the idea that she wasn't avoiding accountability but resisting reduction. This reframing helped shift the narrative from one of defensiveness to one of intentional self-definition, a subtle but powerful distinction in public perception. Cultural commentators began drawing parallels between Lindsay's experience and similar moments involving other celebrities who challenged interview dynamics. These comparisons revealed a pattern where guests who assert emotional boundaries are often labeled difficult, while hosts who push aggressively are praised for being bold. The imbalance sparked renewed debate about who truly controls the narrative in televised conversations. Younger audiences, in particular, responded strongly to Lindsay's decision to leave. Many shared personal stories about walking away from conversations that felt invalidating or emotionally unsafe. In that sense, the moment transcended celebrity culture, becoming relatable on a deeply human level. Lindsay's exit resonated as an act of self-respect that many viewers wished they had felt empowered to do themselves. Marketing analysts observed that despite predictions of backlash, Lindsay's public image did not suffer long-term damage. In fact, engagement around her name reflected increased empathy and interest. The incident appeared to humanize her rather than alienate audiences, reinforcing the idea that vulnerability paired with boundaries can strengthen, rather than weaken, public connection. Some critics argued that the situation exposed a flaw in how redemption narratives are demanded but rarely allowed to conclude. Lindsay had already acknowledged her past repeatedly, yet the expectation to revisit it endlessly remained. Her refusal to continue that cycle challenged the unspoken rule that celebrities must forever perform remorse to maintain public acceptance. As retrospectives emerged, media historians noted how rare it is for guests to exit live daytime television calmly and deliberately. Most memorable walk-offs are fueled by chaos or anger, but Lindsay's quiet departure stood apart. That restraint became central to how the moment was remembered, underscoring its emotional clarity rather than sensationalism. Conversations around the incident also highlighted the emotional labor expected of women in public spaces. Lindsay was composed, articulate, and respectful throughout, yet still faced scrutiny for choosing disengagement. This double standard became a focal point for discussions about how women are often expected to endure discomfort to appear agreeable or resilient. Behind the scenes, industry whispers suggested that booking teams across networks quietly reevaluated their interview strategies. While confrontation may attract short-term attention, trust remains essential for long-term access to high-profile guests. Lindsay's experience illustrated how quickly that trust can erode when empathy is sidelined. Over time, the moment settled into pop culture memory not as a scandal, but as a turning point. It represented a shift toward celebrities reclaiming agency in real time, refusing to participate in narratives that no longer serve them. Lindsay's walk-off symbolized that change without requiring a single dramatic word. Viewers revisiting the episode months later often described feeling different emotions with distance. What once felt tense now appeared instructive, revealing subtle cues that were easy to miss in the moment. Lindsay's calm expressions, measured responses, and eventual decisions seemed increasingly intentional when viewed without the immediacy of live broadcast energy. The legacy of the confrontation continued influencing how audiences interpret similar interviews. Each sharp exchange now carries an undercurrent of awareness, as viewers question whether lines are being crossed. Lindsay's experience sharpened collective sensitivity, making emotional nuance harder to ignore or dismiss. For Lindsay herself, the moment quietly reinforced her evolution. She neither apologized for leaving nor weaponized the incident for attention. That restraint aligned with the narrative she had been trying to convey all along, that growth doesn't require constant explanation, only consistent action. As media cycles moved on, the incident remained referenced in broader discussions about respect, boundaries, and power dynamics. It became less about who was right or wrong and more about what the moment revealed. That shift ensured its relevance beyond gossip, anchoring it in cultural reflection. In the end, Lindsay Lohan walking off The View became a defining example of how silence and departure can sometimes speak louder than debate. It reminded audiences that not every conversation deserves completion, and that choosing to step away can be an act of strength, clarity, and self-preservation that lingers far longer than any argument ever could.